Spurgeon here with RevZilla, and I am back in Pennsylvania after an epic 3,000-mile trek on Triumph's new Street Twin motorcycle. Now for 2016, Triumph has updated their entire line of modern classic motorcycles from the ground up. And the Street Twin is going to replace what was the base Bonneville in this new line of motorcycles. Now this is a gamble for Triumph, and that's because over the past 15 years, that base Bonneville has become a real cult classic for riders that are looking for a bike that looks retro and looks old, but they want the modern reliability of a new motorcycle. And after spending the past 2 weeks with this bike, I'm going to say that the gamble has paid off for them. Now there's a lot that I want to talk about with the Street Twin, and as always, we're going to get into how this bike goes, how it stops, how it handles, and then we're going to get into all the modifications that I would recommend if you were going to add this bike to your garage. Now while we're going through this review, if there's any questions or comments you have for us, make sure to leave them in the section below. And as always, subscribe to us on RevZilla to keep up with all the bike reviews we have rolling out. As for me, I'm going to find a place to pull over so we can get this review started.
Now, I speak from experience when I say I'm extremely familiar with this line of bikes. I've got a personal 2005 Bonneville T100 sitting in my garage with 74,000 miles on it. I bought it brand new when I was in college, and it's stuck with me ever since. What really appealed to me about that particular bike was the fact that it looked vintage, it looked old, but it gave me modern reliability. It was my main mode of transportation when I was in college. I needed something that wasn't going to break down. So when we're looking at the Street Twin, these are all the things that Triumph had to keep in mind when updating the favorite that was the Bonneville for the past 15 years. They had to keep all those retro lines to this, but they had to take that modern sensibility and push it even further. So we're getting things like ABS brakes, we're getting throttle by wire, traction control, and you're getting liquid cooling to the engine. Now the liquid cooling on the engine is probably the hardest part that they had to deal with this. And one of the things that I love is they've kept the air fins, so it looks like that air-cooled engine, but you notice the radiator up front, they've kept it nice and sleek where the old oil cooler used to go. So Triumph has walked that fine line very well, and the new Street Twin, it's gonna give you even more of a vintage look than the old Bonneville. The 18-inch wheel up front adds more of a vintage appeal than that old 17-inch did. The upswept exhaust, brushed stainless steel, sounds absolutely phenomenal, wouldn't even need an aftermarket exhaust. And I love the fact that they've cut down the bulbous tank, giving you more of a streamlined look. And my favorite attribute to this is going to be the low slung handlebar. My favorite modification on the old Bonneville used to be to take the bar off and throw a Renthal dirt bar on there. Triumph has done it for you right out of the box. Now, 10 years ago when I bought my bike, there wasn't a lot of competition. There weren't a lot of additional hats in the ring, if you will. But it's 2016, there's a lot of competition out there. Even within Triumph's own lineup, you could be looking at bikes like the T120 or the Thruxton if you want to take a jump up to a bigger, more powerful machine with a different stance. For riders out there that don't necessarily want a bigger machine and you want to stick around that $8,500 to $9,000 price range, you could be looking at bikes like the Moto Guzzi V7, Ducati Scrambler, or the Harley Sportster series. With the Ducati Scrambler, there's no hiding the wild success that Ducati has had with this bike over the past year and a half. You're looking at a bike that makes 75 horsepower and it weighs about 100 pounds less than pretty much any of the other bikes in this class. The Triumph, however, is going to give you more torque at 3,200 RPM, and you're looking at major service intervals hitting every 32,000 miles. This is going to be a much less maintenance-intensive bike. Rounding things out with the Harley Sportster 883. You've seen Lemmy's review. This bike is going to be a modifier's dream. There's a huge aftermarket out there for it. You can change pretty much anything on it. The old Bonneville, that was its claim to fame. It was the same as the Sportster 83 in that regard. So with the new Street Twin, one of my concerns is how long is it going to take for the aftermarket to catch up to this bike so that customizers can do the same thing with this ride. Now, we've come to my favorite part of the review. I get to suit up and we get to take this bike for a ride and we get to talk through all the different nuances together. Now, while I'm suiting up, there's a lot of you out there that have been asking for more info about the gear that we're wearing when we're on these bike reviews. If you want more info, click that button on your screen right now and check out everything we're wearing. For the rest of you, let's go out for a ride.
So the best place to start on this bike is going to be with the engine, because the engine is all new. Triumph went with a liquid-cooled parallel twin. It's got a 270 crank, single overhead cam, dual counterbalancer setup, and it's now a true 900cc plant. This bike was redesigned to give you more torque, not more horsepower. So where most manufacturers just throw a whole ton of horsepower your way and call it a new bike, Triumph didn't do that. Instead, they actually cut peak horsepower down to 55 ponies, but they upped the torque level. You're getting 59 foot-pounds of torque at 3,200 RPM. This thing hauls like a train compared to the old engine. It feels bigger even though it's producing less power, and Triumph gets a big thumbs up from me for not just throwing more horsepower at the bike and calling it a new machine. Controlling all that power is a new throttle-by-wire system. This allows for traction control, and overall the fueling has been vastly improved over last year's model. The one thing to note is if you take a look over here, it no longer has that fake carburetor setup, so there's no longer an enricher switch sitting here for me to pull out and quote-unquote choke. And on cold starts in the morning, I went out, I fired the bike up, and it just would start, stumble, and then die. I'd have to start it maybe 2 or 3 times sometimes until the bike warmed up. So just keep that in mind if you're considering this machine. When the first press materials came out, this bike was listed as having a 6-speed gearbox, the same as the T120 and the Thruxton. It's actually a 5-speed. And while I was originally disappointed to find out that I wasn't getting a 6-speed with this, coming back from Austin, I did plenty of highway miles where I was cruising down the road at 65, 70 miles an hour. On the open road, I didn't miss the 6-speed as much as I missed a windscreen. I got the hell beat out of me, and I would have loved just a windshield on this if I was going to use this for some longer highway rides. When we're talking about the brakes, Triumph did a great job updating these brakes and giving customers what they asked for. They asked for ABS and they got ABS. Now I was a little bit concerned in the fact that I didn't get a dual disc setup, but with the way the ABS works on this and that single rotor, I can clamp down, bike stops fast, and then all that power pulls me right back up. So not much else has changed. It's still that dual piston Nissan caliper up front as well as the rear, and you get that 310 rotor and that 255 rotor out back, but it works well for a bike that's putting out 55 ponies. The problem that I have with this bike, the biggest issue is going to be the suspension. When I was coming through northern Alabama, I hit some really great curves through the forest up in northern Alabama. I was going back and forth, and I had about 45 pounds of gear in the back. The bike was wallowing all over the place. So I'm 205, 45 pounds of gear, that puts me about 250. With the preload cranked all the way up, this bike still couldn't handle it. When I pulled the gear off, it was a little bit better, but honestly, the suspension should be able to handle about a 250 payload. Triumph also talked about the fact that they upgraded the chassis to give this bike better and more nimble handling. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think what they did was they gave the chassis an update to give it the same nimble handling that the Bonneville used to have. And that's because, check out that front tire. They went to an 18-inch. And they did that because it looks better. It looks more like a vintage ride. In order to get the bike to handle as well as the old one, they had to make some adjustments to rake, to trail, and to wheelbase. And they did that to give the bike a better vintage aesthetic. If you look at the overall bike, the 18-inch simply looks better up front. The whole bike as itself has a really great fit and finish. It looks like a quality vintage machine. But my guess is you're still going to want to make some customizations to this bike because that's what this model line is known for. So let's pull over right now. We'll hit on some modifications that I would make if I was going to add this bike to my garage.
The success of the Bonneville line has been due in no small part to the wide world of aftermarket parts available for it, and the folks that have taken those parts and created one-off motorcycles with them. Now, Triumph makes this very easy for you. If you're the kind of person that doesn't like to get your hands dirty, you have over 150 different customizable parts available that you can put on this bike before you ever pick it up off the showroom floor. Now, if you're anything like me, that doesn't sound like fun and you'd prefer to get your hands dirty yourself. So the first modification I would make with this motorcycle is definitely going to be the suspension. Up front, I'd go with a progressively wound spring and some medium weight fork oil, while in the back, I've had a lot of success with both Öhlins as well as progressive springs, and I'd be really interested to see exactly what we can expect from those two manufacturers in the near future. The other thing I'd want to add right from the get-go would be a center stand to this bike. When I got a flat tire, just outside of Austin, Texas, a center stand would have made it much easier to change. I don't know if you noticed the different rear tire on this motorcycle. It would also make chain maintenance an absolute breeze. Lastly, mirrors on this bike. I don't know how Triumph manages to do it, but every time I get one on their modern classic bikes with stock mirrors, I can't see a thing. I'd pull these off, I'd put CRG bar end mirrors on here, and there should be no surprises there. You've heard me talk about CRG lane splitters before. I put those on there and they would complete the look of the bike. Now, all things considered, Triumph built a better bike. And while no bike is perfect, Triumph really took a step forward with the Street Twin. For some, it could be an inner city commuter, while for others, it might make a great first bike. For me, this is a bike that I could see myself putting some extra little pieces on and using as a weekend tour, as long as those tours didn't really surpass 250, 300 miles a day. Now, there's a lot of down and dirty facts on the Street Twin that we simply didn't have time to get to in the video portion of this review. So if you want to hear more about this bike, head over to Common Tread and read my detailed article where we get into all the facts we didn't have time to cover here. And you can also catch some of the seedy details about my trip through the South. As always, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to keep up with all the bike reviews we have rolling out at RevZilla.com. Thank you for joining us for this look at the Triumph Street Twin. I'm Spurge. Enjoy the ride.